In recent years, many people have started to share the same feeling. Life seems to be getting more and more expensive. Food prices are rising, rent is going up, and in many places, housing costs alone already take up a large portion of monthly income. Quite a few people feel that after paying all the necessary bills, rent, utilities, transportation, and food, there is almost not much left to save. But now, try to imagine the complete opposite scenario. Instead of paying money to live somewhere, you actually get paid to move there. It sounds like a pretty hard to believe idea, doesn't it? But the reality is that programs like this do exist in many places around the world, especially small towns or areas experiencing population decline. Local governments are trying to attract new residents with a variety of incentives. In this video, we're going to explore 10 countries and regions that are doing something quite hard to believe places where sometimes simply agreeing to move there means they're willing to pay you. Mauritius is a small island nation located in the middle of the Indian Ocean, just east of Madagascar. If you've ever imagined living somewhere where you open your door in the morning and see blue ocean, white sand, and a tropical breeze blowing gently year-round, Mauritius is almost the perfect version of that dream. Unlike extremely remote islands like Antikythera in Greece, where it can sometimes be so quiet that you might know almost everyone on the island, Mauritius still has cities, tourism, business, and plenty of activities, so life doesn't become too boring. The nature here looks exactly like a travel postcard in real life. Long stretches of white sandy beaches, turquoise water that's almost crystal clear, and a tropical climate that makes many people feel like they're living in an endless vacation. Each day could start with a cup of coffee overlooking the ocean and end with a sunset that feels very Instagram-worthy. Besides having dreamlike scenery, this place also knows how to appeal to your wallet. Well, not because they want to take money from you, they actually want to give you some. The government of Mauritius has a policy specifically designed to attract startups. They are willing to pay people with business ideas to come here and develop their projects. So the amount must be pretty high, right? Well, it's about 20,000 Mauritian rupees, equivalent to roughly 433 US dollars. That's right. A paradise island with blue seas, white sand, and a tropical climate all year round, and a financial support package roughly equal to the price of a mid-range smartphone. It may sound a bit modest compared to programs in other countries that offer tens of thousands of dollars. But to be fair, the cost of living in Mauritius is relatively comfortable, and this program is meant more as a small push to get started rather than a massive grant. To participate, you simply need to present an existing startup or a business idea to a review board. If they believe the project has the potential to contribute to the local economy, you may be approved and begin building your business right here on the island. So if you're looking for a place that offers both business opportunities and scenery that makes every morning feel like you're at a resort, Mauritius is still quite an interesting option. Even though the financial support isn't very large, in return, you may gain something that many people are willing to spend a lot of money for, a life in the middle of a tropical paradise. Have you ever imagined living on a small island where every morning you wake up to nothing but the sound of waves gently hitting the shore? No car horns, no rush hour traffic, and sometimes not even many people around at all. If that kind of life sounds appealing to you, then the island of Antikythera in Greece might be exactly the place for you. Antikythera sits in the Mediterranean Sea and covers only about 7 square miles, which means it's small enough that you could drive around the island fairly quickly. But what makes this place truly unusual is not its size, it's the number of residents. The island currently has only a few dozen people living there. Yes, you heard that right, not a few hundred. Not a few thousand, just a few dozen. To put that into perspective, a Taco Bell on a random Tuesday afternoon probably has more people inside than this entire island. And because the population is already small and still declining, Antikythera faces a serious challenge. If more people don't move in, the island could become even quieter over time. So a rather interesting solution was introduced. The Greek Orthodox Church decided to offer financial support to families willing to move here. That's right, they genuinely want more people to come live on the island, and the incentive is fairly attractive. If you decide to relocate to Antikythera, you may be provided with housing and land, along with 500 euros per month for the first 3 years, which is roughly 535 US dollars per month. Not bad, right? Of course, there is one small detail to consider. Antikythera is about 9 hours away from Athens by ferry. That means if you want to visit a big city for shopping, attend a concert, or simply change the scenery for a bit, it will be quite a long trip. But in return, you gain a type of lifestyle that is becoming increasingly rare. A tiny community, peaceful surroundings, nature that feels almost untouched, and a truly slow pace of life. So if you've ever dreamed of living on a small island in the middle of the sea, a place where nearly everyone knows each other, and evenings are filled with nothing but ocean waves and sea breeze, Antikythera may be one of the few places in the world that not only allows you to do that, but may even pay you to do it. If you like the idea of getting paid to move somewhere new, but don't want a long-term commitment like buying property or settling down permanently, then Taiwan could be an interesting option. Technically, they don't pay you just to show up with a suitcase, but they are willing to offer a fairly attractive salary if you come here to teach English. And here's the notable part. Among many countries hiring English teachers, Taiwan is known for offering relatively competitive pay. Salaries typically range between $2,000 and $3,000 per month. At first glance, some people might think, that sounds okay, but maybe not that high. But when you place that number within the context of Taiwan's cost of living, the story becomes a bit more interesting. According to many expat communities and sites like Nomad List, that income is generally enough to live quite comfortably, especially if you stay in major cities like Taipei. Rent, food, and transportation there are still considered fairly reasonable compared to many other large cities in Asia. Imagine what your schedule might look like. During the day, you spend a few hours teaching English classes. On weekends or days off, you could take a train to the white sandy beaches in the southern part of the island, hike through lush green national parks, or simply wander through Taipei's famous night markets, where the street food options are so endless that you could spend an entire evening trying new dishes and still not reach the end. And if you've ever seen photos of Taiwan's night markets, you'll understand why many people say the island has one of the most vibrant street food cultures in Asia. So when you look at the bigger picture, the model becomes quite appealing. You move to a modern, energetic island, teach English for a few hours a day, and in return, you earn enough to live comfortably, while much of your remaining time can be spent exploring the city, nature, and the well-known food culture of the island. Sign me up, right? It could be considered one of the most interesting ways to both work and experience life in a completely new place. If this sounds interesting to you, let us know by hitting the subscribe button. Switzerland has long been considered one of the most beautiful places to live in the world. Everything here looks so perfect that people sometimes joke, Switzerland looks like a landscape painting, except real people are actually living inside it. But here's the interesting part. If you are lucky enough and meet the right conditions, you could even get paid to move here. Specifically, a small village called Albinon, located in the Swiss Alps, is facing a fairly common issue in many rural areas across Europe, a declining population, especially among younger residents. Many people have moved to larger cities for work, leaving small villages like Albinon becoming increasingly quiet. And when we say quiet, we're talking about a rather impressive number. The entire village has only about 240 residents. To put that into perspective, that number is sometimes smaller than the population of a single average apartment building in downtown New York. Because of this, the local government came up with a simple but surprisingly effective idea to attract new residents. Pay people to move there. Yes, if you relocate to Albinon, you could receive around $27,000. And if you have children, each child could add about $11,000 more to that amount. Of course, there are a few conditions attached. First, you need to be under 45 years old and commit to living there for at least 10 years. In addition, you must be a Swiss citizen or permanent resident, and you need to agree to purchase a home in the village worth at least about $214,000. In other words, the financial support acts more like a helpful push to start a new life, rather than a situation where you simply arrive with a suitcase and receive the money immediately. But if you truly move here, the biggest reward probably isn't the money. You would be living in a small village surrounded by the Alps, where the air is fresh, the scenery is dramatic, and life moves at a slower pace. With only a few hundred residents, chances are you will quickly get to know almost all of your neighbors. And every morning, instead of looking out at skyscrapers or heavy traffic, you might sit with a cup of coffee and look directly at the snow-covered Alps in the distance. Tempting, isn't it? In the United States, the average home price around April 2023 was roughly $408,000. In other words, buying a typical home in many parts of the U.S. could require years of saving, taking out a mortgage, and making long-term payments. But now, imagine a place in the world where you could buy a house for 16 cents. Yes, that's right, not $16,000, not $1,600, just 16 cents. It sounds like a typo, or maybe some kind of buy bread, get a house promotion, but this is actually a real program in the town of Legrad, Croatia. Legrad is a small town in northern Croatia, near the Hungarian border. Like many rural areas in Europe, it has been facing a familiar issue, the population slowly declining over time. Younger residents move to bigger cities to find jobs, while older houses gradually become empty. So, in 2021, local authorities decided to try a rather bold solution. They started selling houses for 16 cents. Not an auction, not a 50% discount, but literally 16 cents. Of course, this doesn't mean you will instantly receive a perfect house. Most of these properties are older homes that require renovation. But even then, the story gets even more interesting. Besides selling homes for an almost symbolic price, the town of Legrad is also willing to provide around $4,000 to help you repair or renovate the property. In other words, you might find yourself in a rather funny situation. You pay 16 cents to buy a house, and then the local government gives you money to fix it. It sounds almost unbelievable, but there are still a few conditions involved. First, you need to show that you have stable financial resources, since you'll still need money to live there long term. Second, you must be under 40 years old. And most importantly, you must commit to living there for at least 15 years. In other words, this is not the kind of situation where someone buys a house and then sells it a few months later for profit. The goal is to attract new residents who genuinely want to build a long-term life in the town. If you move to Legrad, you'll live in a relatively small community of about 2,240 residents. Life here has a peaceful rural rhythm, less noise, more nature, and a slower pace compared to large cities. That might sound quite appealing to the introverts out there. And if you occasionally want something more lively, you can still explore other famous places in Croatia. From Legrad, it's about a 90-minute drive to the capital city of Zagreb, or roughly 7 hours to Dubrovnik, one of the country's most famous tourist destinations. So while many places around the world are seeing home prices climb higher every year, Legrad might look like a dream destination for many Gen Z individuals who feel like buying a home is getting further and further out of reach. You may have started to notice a pattern. Places with smaller populations often seem quite willing to offer incentives to attract businesses, and that makes sense. Many low-population areas struggle to keep young people from moving away, mainly because job opportunities can be limited. In the case of Ireland, the story isn't very different. However, what makes Ireland interesting is that it doesn't exactly pay you directly to move there, like some other places on this list. Instead, the incentives offered to businesses can be so attractive that some people jokingly say, they may not be paying you, but it almost feels like they are. And the reason for that comes down to one very important factor in business: corporate taxes. For many years, Ireland has been considered one of the most business-friendly tax environments in Europe. The country's corporate tax rate was long around 12.5%, which is noticeably lower than in many other developed nations. Major technology companies such as Apple, Google, and Facebook chose Ireland as the base for their European operations. In other words, a relatively small country with a population of only a few million people became home to offices of some of the largest tech companies in the world. This created an interesting ripple effect. Not only large corporations, but also small businesses and startups began to see Ireland as an attractive place to launch a company. But Ireland is not only about business policies. Life there also offers a wide variety of experiences. If you prefer a quiet lifestyle, you could live in a small house surrounded by green valleys, where fields stretch across the landscape and country roads wind through the countryside. In many regions of Ireland, the scenery sometimes feels like something straight out of a classic European fairy tale. On the other hand, if you enjoy city life, you could move to Dublin, the capital of Ireland. The city is often ranked highly for its music scene, nightlife, and overall safety. It is also home to many technology companies, international offices, and a large expatriate community. Of course, such favorable tax policies have also sparked quite a bit of debate over the years. In recent years, Ireland has made some adjustments in response to international discussions. The corporate tax rate was increased from 12.5% to around 15%. It may sound like a big change, but compared with many other countries, that rate is still considered fairly competitive. Because of that, Ireland continues to maintain strong appeal for businesses. If you are an entrepreneur or someone currently thinking about starting a business, this next place might immediately catch your attention. In Santiago, the capital of Chile, the government actually runs a program that pays startups to move there. And we're not talking about a few hundred or a few $1,000s. The support can reach around $40,000. Yes, the idea is fairly simple. If you have a promising business project and are willing to move both yourself and your company to Santiago, the Chilean government may provide financial support to help you get started. The program is called Startup Chile, and it has been around since 2010. Essentially, it works as a seed accelerator, an early-stage startup program funded by the government with the goal of attracting new companies from around the world. Normally, when a startup begins, founders need to search for investors, raise funding, or use their own savings to launch the project. But in this case, a country is essentially saying, if you have a strong idea, we're willing to provide funding so you can bring your company here. Of course, you cannot simply arrive and immediately receive the money. To participate in the program, you need to submit a detailed proposal for your project. A review board evaluates whether the idea has potential, and if it is accepted, you may receive funding to develop your startup in Santiago. If you decide to move there, you will be living in Santiago, a large city with around 5.6 million residents. Unlike the quiet rural towns mentioned earlier on this list, Santiago is a busy, energetic urban center filled with activity. According to many expatriates who have moved there, one of the most enjoyable aspects of Santiago is its lively street culture. The city is known for colorful street art, creative neighborhoods, and a fairly rich cultural scene. Another big advantage is that the cost of living in Santiago is generally considered reasonable, especially when compared with many other large cities around the world of a similar size. If you've ever heard of the concept of siesta, the famous afternoon rest tradition in Spain, and thought that kind of lifestyle sounds perfect for you, there is actually a place in Spain that not only allows you to live that way, but may even pay you to move there. That place is Ponga, a small town located in the mountains of northern Spain. It's a peaceful area surrounded by lush green landscapes, winding roads through valleys, and the fresh air typical of mountain regions. The town currently has only about 600 residents, and like many rural areas in Europe, Ponga is facing a familiar challenge. Its population has gradually declined over time. Younger people often move to larger cities, leaving small towns quieter each year. Because of this, local authorities came up with a simple idea to attract new residents. They decided to offer financial incentives to people willing to move there. Specifically, if you relocate to Ponga, you could receive about 3,000 euros, which is roughly $3,200 SS dollars. That already sounds appealing. But the interesting part of the program doesn't stop there. If you move to Ponga and have a baby while living there, the town may offer an additional $3,200 for each child. In a lighthearted way, the program almost feels like a very direct invitation. We need more residents, and if you help increase the population a little, even better. Of course, there is one small condition attached. If you accept this incentive, you must commit to living in Ponga for at least about 5 years. But for many people, that might not be a difficult requirement because the area itself is truly peaceful. Ponga sits next to a natural reserve recognized by UNESCO, with green forests, hiking trails, and a pleasant Mediterranean climate. That means you could spend your time hiking, exploring nature, or simply enjoying fresh air almost year-round. Life here might move at a gentle rhythm, quiet mountain mornings, afternoon walks through nature, and of course, time for a proper Spanish siesta in the middle of the day. Moving to a peaceful mountain town, receiving financial support, and even getting an additional bonus if the population grows, it's not every day that you hear about a place offering both incentives for new residents and extra rewards for welcoming new members into the community. But in Ponga, that's something that is genuinely happening, and honestly, it might be worth considering. If there's a country famous for vast landscapes, dramatic natural scenery, and winters that can make you think twice about stepping outside in the morning, it would probably be Canada. But beyond the beautiful views and fresh air, some regions in Canada also offer interesting programs designed to attract young people to live and work there. One notable example is the province of Saskatchewan, located in Western Canada. The region has been facing a challenge that many areas around the world also experience, something often called brain drain. In simple terms, this happens when young, educated, and skilled individuals leave a region to move to larger cities or other countries where there are more opportunities. When this trend continues for many years, smaller regions may begin to lose a significant portion of their skilled workforce. To address this, Saskatchewan introduced a straightforward idea: encourage recent graduates to stay by offering tax refunds. And this is the part that catches many people's attention. If you graduate from an approved university and choose to remain in Saskatchewan to work, you may be eligible for tax credits worth up to $15,000 per year. But the most interesting detail is that this support can continue for up to 10 years. In theory, the total amount could reach around $150,000 over that period. At this point, many people might start thinking, wait, are they basically paying me to stay and work there? In a way, yes. It's one of the methods Saskatchewan uses to retain young professionals instead of losing them to larger cities. If you decide to live there, you might choose a mid-sized city like Saskatoon, which has a population of about 273,000. It's large enough to provide most modern services, but still much smaller and quieter than major metropolitan areas. Another advantage of Saskatchewan is its relatively affordable cost of living. Compared with many large cities in North America, housing and everyday expenses are often noticeably lower. The region is also a great place for people who enjoy outdoor activities. With wide open plains, lakes, and natural parks, residents can go camping, fishing, boating, or exploring nature for much of the year. There is also another point that locals often take pride in. Saskatchewan is widely recognized as the birthplace of Medicare Canada, the country's public healthcare system. This means residents can access medical services without paying direct out-of-pocket costs, in the same way people often do in many other places. When it comes to places willing to pay people to move there, Italy is probably one of the most well-known countries for this type of program. Across the country, quite a few small towns have introduced incentives to attract new residents. Names such as Candela, Sardinia, and Presiccia Quarrica have all appeared in news reports with surprisingly attractive invitations for people willing to start a new life in a completely different place. Among them, Presiccia Quarrica is considered one of the places offering the most notable incentives. If you look at photos of the town, many people's first reaction is usually something like, wait, a place this beautiful actually needs to pay people to move there. Presiccia Quarrica is located in the heel of Italy's famous boot-shaped map in the southern part of the country. From here, you only need a short drive to reach the stunning beaches of the Salento area, which is known for its clear blue water and white sand. The town itself has all the classic features of southern Italy: narrow stone streets, historic houses with iron balconies, small squares where residents gather in the evening, and of course, authentic Italian cuisine, with family-run restaurants serving rich local dishes. But even with all of that charm, the part that catches the most attention is something else. The town of Presiccia Quarrica is willing to offer around 30,000 euros, equivalent to more than $32,000, to people who decide to relocate and settle there. It sounds like a surprising invitation, but the reason behind it is actually quite familiar: a declining population. Like many small towns across Europe, younger residents have moved away in search of job opportunities in larger cities, leaving the town with fewer people each year. As a result, local authorities decided to try a very direct approach, encouraging new residents by offering financial incentives. Of course, there are a few conditions attached. If you want to receive the incentive, you must purchase a house in the town, and that house must have been built before 1991. In addition, you must officially move your primary residence there, meaning you truly live in the town rather than simply buying property and leaving it empty. From a lifestyle perspective, Presiccia Quarrica offers quite a lot to enjoy. You could live in a quiet, historic town, just a few minutes drive from the sea, enjoy local food, and experience the slower pace of life that is so characteristic of southern Italy. Looking at this list, one interesting pattern becomes clear. In some parts of the world, when populations decline and communities become smaller, local governments start looking for creative ways to attract new residents through unique support programs. From peaceful villages in Europe to more dynamic cities in other regions, each place offers a very different kind of lifestyle. And who knows, one of them might suit someone who is looking for a slower and more stable pace of life in the future. Out of the 10 places we just explored, which location do you find the most interesting? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can discuss it together. Before we wrap up, a quick note. The information in this video is compiled from publicly available sources, official reports, and various analytical references. It is intended for informational and exploratory purposes only. If you are thinking about living, investing, or traveling in any of the places mentioned, it may be helpful to review official sources and consider your own circumstances before making any decisions. And if you enjoy exploring places around the world like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next exploration.